Aaron, what is AppSec, and what are the primary responsibilities of an AppSec team?
Sure. So traditionally, web AppSec or AppSec involves a lot of web applications. So we're testing web applications to make sure that the data in the application isn't compromised. Because as a consumer, as somebody that's using the internet or going over internet banking or whatever that may be, we want to make sure that that data doesn't get out there. And we've been hearing in the news every day, right? There's lots of different breaches. But now we can expand that, though. If I look around my house, I see my 5-year-old on his iPad, right? I hear my washing machine go ding, and it's running a little app that's actually telling me that my washing machine is done. When I start my car, right? So, apps are becoming like pretty much like the fabric in our life to that extent. And so AppSec really encompasses all of that. And so it's just getting a lot broader as far as what's not running an app. It's like what is, and everything is pretty much becoming an app. And so for the AppSec team, our primary responsibility is making sure that we keep the company, we're all working for companies, right? We want to keep our company data safe. We want to keep our company out of the news. And we want to show that we actually have privacy and security all together in our organization.
Matt, how do you manage AppSec teams when they're dispersed? What's the way of handling that?
Well, that's a very interesting issue, and AppSec teams in general tend to be rather small. The sort of from the hip ratio is usually ops to developer is usually 10 to 1. Security to developer is usually 100 to 1.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's the kind of the normal numbers there. So you're really sort of behind the 8 ball to begin with. So a lot of times, just to get the good people, honestly, they are dispersed. So if I want to hire somebody and they happen to be in Chicago and I'm in Austin, and they don't want to move, we'll probably hire them anyway. So the geographically dispersed team is kind of getting to be the norm, just because of trying to find the qualified people. A lot of times, luckily, particularly for applications and web apps in particular, or REST APIs or those kind of things, you just need internet access. So at least from a functional point of view, or you VPN into a data center, right? So from a functional point of view, that's really not too hard to manage. From a team communication point of view, that gets a little more interesting. One of the things that I think I've been successful with in several different places at Rackspace and at Pearson is having your internet presence be a chat app of sort. Is it IRC? Is it HipChat? Is it Slack? Whatever. And that's sort of your main means of communication. You have a public channel that you sit in, and any developer can jump in and ask you questions, or you also have a private channel so that you can sort of have some bullpen talk amongst the team. And that's probably the best way. At Pearson, we're geographically dispersed in that we have some in Sri Lanka and some in India and some in the US and some in the UK. So we even kind of stretch time zones. And so a lot of that is having the internet presence via chat and then doing a lot of things that allow you to set up people to work asynchronously, right? Mm-hmm. I know that I need so-and-so to do an engagement for me. Here's everything you need to know, but you're in a time zone that you're sleeping, but I'm awake, so I can lay this up for you so that when you wake up, it's waiting for you in the morning, and boom, off you go.
So it's changing your communication patterns and
definitely
largely working under an assumption that you're going to need a dispersed team anyways.
That's definitely true, yeah. Most companies historically like to have everybody in one place, and that's very nice, sure. But that makes hiring and maintaining people in a team much harder. So these days, I think that the smart money is on letting go of that, because one, developers are now, if you talk to a lot of development shops, they'll hire a good developer in wherever the heck they are.
Right.
I mean, and so that same thought process is now sort of bleeding into AppSec because of just finding the people is hard.
I would say one thing that really changed and helped our team out was I can remember the transition from chat and telephone to hang out in full video conferences.
Oh, that
was huge because
point.
It really you kind of do feel like Matt.
You and I did hangouts almost every day.
And I never met him in person when we hired him, and it was 4 months before we actually
physically met.
But we felt like we already knew each other, mm-hmm. and that we had been face to face because the hangouts and the video were that good. Yeah. And so our teams in Sri Lanka and India, you do feel like you kind of know them, even though there is that distance.
Yeah, the first time I met Lee in the UK, it was the same thing. I felt like I knew him because I talked with him a whole bunch. Sure. Now, I hadn't talked to him physically.
Right?
Yeah,
but you kind of knew him.
Yeah, but we already had a rapport, so it wasn't that awkward oh, hey, who are you? How do we engage?
And it can be more informal, you can just hit him up for a call. Rather, when you pick up the telephone, it seems very disconnected, sure. But here it's just boom, I can talk to him right then. Yeah. And it does, you get a lot of that just hallway conversation.
Well, it's a great way to sort of escalate chats, too. If you're having this back and forth chat where you're not understanding each other, it's let's just do a quick hangout. Yeah. Boom. Okay, hey, this is what I mean. Let me draw a little picture and hold it up to the camera if I have to. I mean, I've done that with you before. Yeah. This is what I'm talking about,
sure,
see?
Sure.
And it works. It helps out. You're right that the video is a huge, huge aspect. Because for a while my camera wasn't working, and I just like, I'm Amazon, I'm buying a new one right now today. Like not having a camera actually hurt.
So is the way that you stagger it, I'm always fascinated by dispersed teams. So the way that you're staggering it is primarily synchronous chat using something like Slack or whatever.
Right.
And then video is the next option. You don't just keep the video open.
No, but there was many times where we would pull each other into conversations or even get a developer and pull them in, and it was super handy.
Yeah, those were definitely kind of ad hoc. There wasn't like at Rackspace, I was in a group that we did like a hack day in essence. And we did have a meeting room with a camera and a big screen. Because we were a dispersed team, there was most of us in San Antonio, but there were several people off. And we just had 2 guys up on the screen, and the rest of us were in the room, and we had the video on all day long, and we just chatted and like, hey, anybody know how to do this? I'm trying to set this thing. Oh, you have to do. Okay, cool, thanks. And you get, boom. So it functionally it was like everybody went into a conference room, just 2 people happened to be on screens.
Right. Aaron, how has AppSec changed over the last couple of years, last 2 years or so? Has it become more complicated?
I would say for sure. I mean, AppSec has been something that's, some guy in the basement does something and then comes to me and tells me that, if I'm a developer, something's wrong with my app, to now where, before it was like, you should fix your app because somebody might breach you. And they're like, well, that's few and far between. And now,
Who would do that?
Right. And now it's like every other day or every day in the news. I'm sure if you search for it, there's going to be some big breach of some sort. And so it's front and center for most people. And I think that has been the biggest shift in application security. And also, I'm seeing, and I'm hoping this is true, where we're working more together. It's not just security saying it's bad. You're getting it from the top boardroom down. So we're not having to, not say fight, but it's much easier for us to sell security because now it can be a great differentiator. Before it was just like this added burden. You have to do it because of compliance, but now there's a whole lot more reasons why you want to do security. And you want to do it, you want to do it appropriately.
Yeah, I would say kind of like in the what air quotes the bad old days of security. It was much like what they talk about the bad old days of ops, where the code would be written and then you throw it over the wall to ops and they get to deal with it. Right. Well, it was like that with security. Like you're a developer, you wrote an app, I throw this big fat PDF over the wall and I'm like, deal with it, right? It's a completely dysfunctional model. And I think a lot of that is changing as well to where the most rewarding work I've had in my 10 plus years of being an AppSec guy has been when I was actually engaged in interacting directly with the teams and not doing the throw over the wall, but actually pushing stuff directly into their bug trackers, going to stand-ups. Like actually being I was part of a product development at Rackspace, and that was fantastic because we started on day one with a security sort of, a mindset and just a focus. Like as we're talking about things, people say, hey, I think I want to do this. I'm like, have you thought about this angle? Ooh, no, we haven't. Let's change how we're going to do that because, this aspect, that's not their domain. Like they're the developers, and this happened to be an OpenStack thing. They're a developer, they really know OpenStack, but maybe they don't have the security mindset, the sort of attacker mindset. I could bring that to the table and focus discussions really early on before there was lots of code written, lots of like, oh God, now we have to refactor, and this is 3 or 4 sprints worth of work, right? Getting that done early makes it so much more palatable. And the dev teams actually really, which is radically different from most AppSec people, the dev teams actually liked me and were like, hey, we're having a hack day, we want you there, because I was actually value add to them as opposed to this guy that hands me this big fat PDF that derails my sprint, and now we got to parse this thing that I don't understand about cross-site whatever. Like, what is this? Isn't even correct. This is a false positive. These idiots. Like that's just not a happy world. But a lot of traditional AppSec sort of used to go down that road, and I think the more progressive shops are realizing that one, you're not going to slow down the business. They want that thing out the door yesterday. So trying to be the traffic cop is a losing proposition. And 2, if you really want to work with teams, you have to add value to what they do, particularly product teams. And if you are just saying everything's bad, everything's wrong, and particularly sort of giving them information in a format that they don't understand or they're not used to, you're really doing a disservice to the business. Like at the end of the day, the business is there to make money. You're there to make sure what they push out the door is most resilient and rugged as possible. So you have to get that in the context of as they're pushing the thing out the door, as they're doing the development, let me work with you as opposed to sort of work against you, which was the sort of historical model.
The one other thing I mentioned too is a lot of times we were brought in at the very, very end.
Oh, yes.
Right. and they were like, okay, you've got 2 days to test this. And so you find a lot of bad things, or maybe you find nothing, which is fine. But typically we will find a lot of things, and then we'll say you need to fix it. And they're like, well, we can't fix it because there's not enough time. And so now we're saying, well, we want to move back all the way to the beginning with you, right? And we'll be there with you so that it's not a surprise. We're not like springing something on you and saying, oh, well, if he had known about that, we would have done it. Right, and so I think that the biggest thing to us is cooperation, working together, and not having that separation. Bring your security guys, because at the end of the day, we want to see the company succeed. It's not just about saying no, right? It's about saying here's the risk with it. So I think that's the really huge change that we see.
Like the DevOps mindset of like everybody's part of the team, and nobody wins when it's Thursday and you want to launch on Friday and you find a really ugly bug, and now we have these high-level conversations about do we launch, do we not launch, how do we fix it, what do we remediate, is some poor dude gonna have to work over the weekend 12 hours a day to get this thing patched? Like nobody wins when those things happen. So the sort of empathy and understanding that we have a business and we have something that we need to produce, and we're all on the same page. Like I don't like the conversations that I used to have in the bad old days of like, oh, you're launching tomorrow. Well, you can't because I found a critical, and by the way, our SLA says you can't launch with a critical, and everybody's upset and nobody's happy. Right. Just nobody wins. Nobody wins.
Even if people understand that.
Even if people understand that, it's still awful. And like. What kind of relationship does it establish with what end up being your peers, like the product managers and the dev teams? We're all trying to get this thing out the door. Like that, the business at the end of the day is there to make money.
It's your sort of the internal affairs cops.
Right? Yeah, nobody. And they're well loved.
Yes. So last question for both of you, and Aaron, I'll start with you. What people or projects are you following these days?
So, we work heavily with OWASP project, which is the Open Web Application Security Project. And so there's lots of different resources on there. And so, we follow a lot of those projects on there. There's one that benchmarks applications and puts them into 3 buckets, right? And says, okay, this app that you have, it meets this level of security or this level. And it's kind of a yardstick for developers to understand where their application is. So that's one project that I really like.
OWASP ASVS?
The ASVS. And I do like a lot what Josh Corman is doing with I Am the Cavalry, which is the idea that, we can't just sit around waiting for something to happen and something, people just to start coding securely on their own and people to take this seriously. We have to step up and provide that and actually be involved and actually put forward ideas and not just say, well, this is bad, but actually give solutions. And so that's one that I really think is he's made some really good progress in that area. And there's still a lot more to be made there. But it's just, I've been also watching just all the things that are coming online. It's like you hear IoT buzzword all over the place, and you think, how are we going to secure that? How can we even test it? We've got to get our hands on these devices. And so that's the other projects that I've been following with real interest.
Yeah, I definitely say the I Am the Cavalry I'm a big fan of. I think that's really, the engagement model is very proactive and a sort of a we're all in this together model that I Am the Cavalry has, and I think that's a much better approach than the look at haha, we broke all your stuff and now I'm at this hacker conference, name and shame kind of thing. I mean, I guess that has its place if people don't want to play ball, but I really think that sort of should be a last-ditch effort. If you cannot get any traction, then maybe that's the way to go. But I think engaging with the industry is a much better way, and a proactive, like, we all know there's going to be problems in software. Some of them will be functional, some of them will be bugs, but let's figure out a way that we can deal with those in the most, efficient manner and without a lot of finger pointing. Right. So I Am the Cavalry, fantastic. Another OWASP project that I really like is OWASP Zap, which is it's an intercepting proxy. It's a way to inspect and modify and look at web traffic between a browser and a web application. But the thing I really like about it is Simon Bennett is the project leader. He works for Mozilla. It's all open source. But the really cool thing is there's a way to run it headless. So now there's a way that I can now integrate this thing into a CI/CD pipeline, and I'm now beginning to be sort of an automated, integrated portion of the build process. And I'm a huge fan of any tool. The Gauntlet is another one that gives you that idea. It's a BDD style testing tool that gives you this way to sort of sanity check things as you go. I think one of the problems security has is we want everything to be perfect. At least historically, that's what people want. And for me, I think, maybe I'm older, maybe I'm just more pragmatic. I don't know what happened with me, but to me, I'm like, let's be pragmatic about what we can really achieve. Like, I cannot get 100% test out the door, given, right? I want that, but I can't. but I can automate 40% of it, and I can know that every app that goes out the door is 40% checked. That's better than the spot checking here or there because we're 100-to-1 ratio and we just can't do everything. So let's give everybody 40, and those really scary ones, maybe those will get spot checked. Right. And the other project, this is somewhat self-serving. Aaron and I have a project called the OWASP AppSec pipeline, where we're trying to take DevOps and Agile and sort of build pipeline ideas and apply that to the work you do inside of an AppSec program. Because once again, we're behind the 8 ball in terms of people. And we want to add as much automation and sort of just get all the paper cuts and the sort of silly things that don't require a human brain, automate those out of the way so that the few people you have can be used maximally.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.